Hello, Jason Fanelli here. Thanks for clicking on the video. I hope you enjoy this interview with Kait Tremblay, narrative director of Soft Rains, and their game Ambrosia Sky, the clean 'em up sciencey game with an overall message that death is a positive thing. I think it's a very cool thing to explore, especially in video games where death is usually seen as not so positive or, if anything, trifling. So to have this impact and to explore the impact of death on a person is very, very interesting. So I hope you enjoy the interview. Like, comment, subscribe, do all the YouTube stuff, and I will see you at the end. All right, here we are. Kait Tremblay. Tremblay, am I saying that right?
Yeah,
Probably should have asked that
probably.
before I started recording.
Okay.
Narrative director over at Soft Rains, Ambrosia Sky. I have been enamored by this game since I saw it back in June. Lizzie will tell you the discussion I had with his name eludes me now was
Joel,
yeah
right? Joel
yeah yeah yeah
Burgess?
yeah
Yeah.
yeah was fascinating stuff. So talk to me about when you're writing this story. When did the idea of death as a positive, which is very rare in video games now, when did that hit? When was that something you considered?
Yeah, that was there right from the get-go, right? Like I've worked on other death positive games before in the past. Like A Mortician's Tale is kind of one of those big ones for me. It's actually the game where I learned about death positivity and kind of like dove deep into that world. And so we released that in 2017. And so ever since A Mortician's Tale, death positivity has been a big part of my life, a big part of my art, and kind of just how I approach and think about things. So when we started thinking about Ambrosia Sky, like the death positivity angle was kind of there right away, right? It's like if we're going to do a game about cleaning or do a game about death cleaners, then like I want to engage with the topic earnestly and
Mm-hmm.
honestly. So
Yeah, makes
yeah.
sense. So when you're studying different methods of death positivity or different ways to look at death, how many different cultures are you wrapping into? Because there's a religious aspect, there's the world aspect, different regions of the world. Most of
Yeah.
them are sort of tied together, but based on what I've seen so far from Ambrosia Sky, it seems more, I don't want to say generic, maybe more agnostic, maybe not so much in the
Yeah.
specific spirituality, but more of a general spirituality. Was that important?
Yeah, it was definitely intentional, right? Like
Okay.
I've done a lot of research as wide as I possibly can go. From Here to Eternity was a really important book in the early stages of thinking about and kind of developing Ambitious Guy. And so From Here to Eternity is just like it's examining different funerary practices and the way we interact with bodies around the world.
Mm-hmm.
And one of her theses in that book is like how removed we are from bodies and death in the West, right? Especially in like North America. And so that was a kind of an important framing and like an important part of the research. But for Ambrosia Sky, we did want to kind of extrapolate it a little bit more and kind of focus more on the scarabs and what their attempts with death are, right? So the scarabs, that's the name of the organization that the main character Dahlia is a part of. And so scarabs are these kind of like mystical field scientists / funerary directors who go and examine dead bodies across the cosmos and take viable samples of DNA and upload them to the Ambrosia Project. And the Ambrosia Project is this pursuit of immortality by way of trying to understand cellular decay, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so for us, taking all of that research that we've done and all the perspectives and consultations that we have around different ways, different cultures and people react to death and with funerary practices, and then kind of abstract that into what is the scarab's credo here, right? And so
Okay.
Dahlia, as a representative of the scarabs, is kind of this like agnostic figure. We've definitely played with like ways in which to go more into specific spiritualities, and we ended up going more this path because it just felt more true and correct to who the scarabs were and how they kind of
Okay.
think about and approach death. But that's kind of how all that took shape.
So when talk to me about the Ambrosia project in the game. So the way it
Yeah.
was described to me was it's something you have to opt into,
Yes.
but it is an attempt to rid rid the universe of this fungus. Is that correct?
No. So the Ambrosia Project is separate to the fungus actually.
Okay.
Spoilers in game
Oh.
they will intersect, but
Okay.
as designed the Ambrosia Project is actually separate. It is about understanding and trying to reverse cellular decay in humanity, particularly it's kind of a more specific form of immortality, right?
Okay.
And so in the game you will go and find people who have consented to be a part of the Ambrosia Project. Consent's a really important topic for me when it comes to things like death, particularly around like what happens to our bodies after we die.
Mm-hmm.
I think consent is really important. Like we should be able to have say over what we do and don't agree to. So in that kind of sense, it's almost like similar to organ donation. Like, do you sign up to be an organ donor upon death, and then people will be able to do that, or do you donate your body to science? Like, kind of in that vein, right? So you will have to first find people who have consented to be a part of this, who agree to have their DNA sampled from their corpses and then uploaded into the larger Ambrosia Project, which is kind of similar in vein to like the Human Genome Project, right, where you're doing a lot of DNA sequencing to try to understand something. So that's the first part of it. And the second part is that the samples have to come from a person who has died within 48 hours. The time window was really important for us too, in terms of just the science behind how we're thinking about protein structures and how protein structures interact with different environmental factors and that kind of stuff. If I'm sounding a little vague here, it's because I understand a little bit of it. Our technical artist is a former biochemist, and so she was actually super instrumental, in helping me ground the Ambrosia Project in enough reality that it would make sense, but still let us kind of have fun and play with the boundaries of what we wanted to play with. So that's kind of how the Ambrosia Project, like, when the world building side takes shape, right? And then in the game, you play as Dahlia, and you're finding bodies, and then you will do this DNA sampling, and you'll listen to their last rites as you're doing it.
So I am curious about the topic of consent, because I get this idea where, and this may be a spoiler, maybe you can't talk about this yet, there's going to come a time in this game where maybe Dahlia wants to collect a sample and can't because the consent's not there, or vice versa. There could be someone that she does not want to be part of the project, but they consented, so she has to. What went into that sort of, like, not controversy, but that sort of respect to consent as well, and making that such a big part of this project?
Yeah, that's definitely a big part of Dahlia's motivations too, right? Like, we really want her to be a fully formed character that has these kind of opinions. And so we have talked about later death rituals that you can do in the game that do kind of grapple with these topics, right? Like, somebody that Dahlia really doesn't want to do a death ritual for, but has to. Like, how will that make her feel? Or somebody that she really wishes she could, but she can't, right? Maintaining and honoring that consent is kind of like a boundary that we agreed we wouldn't break. And it's a really important boundary to preserve, right? And it does kind of create this interesting emotional landscape for Dahlia when she does come across people that she has complicated feelings on and she doesn't know how to process, but she still has to do her job, right? Like, those two things will come into conflict while preserving and maintaining the sanctity of consent.
Sure. Yeah. So in the demo that I saw back at Summer Games Fest and the one that I played on Steam here, when it's time for her to collect the sample, all she really does is she just kind of sits in this very, not prone, but very respectful position, hands on lap, knees down, just very serene almost. Yeah. Like a serenity to it, even with something as serious as death. How important was that to convey? And part of the whole positive image is like, hey, this is just something that happens. Yes, it's final, but it's going to happen to all of us eventually. And we're trying to let you know that it's not as doom and gloom as it seems, right?
Yeah. The kind of like quiet intimacy of those moments were really important to us. We really did want to make those moments about the person that you are doing the death ritual for, right? Like, we really wanted to take the focus off of Dahlia and really put it onto this person. And so you'll have those comic book style vignettes where you'll see Dahlia interacting with the body, and then above that you'll hear and listen to the last will, right? And so this is the person who's having the death ritual performed on them. They're kind of talking through what does death mean to them, why do they consent, all that kind of stuff. So we did really want that moment to be about witnessing and being there with the body and listening to the person and letting them kind of take center stage, but maintaining that in that really kind of like quiet, intimate tone, right? Some of them are sad, some of them are more hopeful, but like, we did want to really just kind of like let the moment speak for itself, or more so, I guess, like let the person who has died speak for themselves, right? And kind of honor that. Yeah.
Sure. I've noticed so far we've talked about getting to these bodies post-death, like they've already expired. You're within the 48 hours post-death. Was there any thought to perhaps, and maybe this is a spoiler too, maybe Dahlia arriving before the passing, or like, because I think of like death doulas, right?
Yeah,
They prepare you for that. I have a couple of friends who actually do that. So
yeah.
I'm wondering if any consideration went into, or even any influence from the death doula uh, job went into the creation of the scarabs as a whole, if not Dahlia specifically.
Yeah, it not for the scarabs. I will say that kind of perspective is something that Dahlia will grapple with herself throughout
Okay.
the game, right? Like she's in a big emotional state coming to this game because she's coming home for the first time in 15 years.
Mm,
She's doing a job she's really good at, but it's the first time she has to do her job for people she knows and people she's loved and people that she hasn't seen in a while. And so she's kind of really starting to grapple with what it means to do her job,
mm,
stacked against her emotions. And so that kind of perspective of like, why am I only good around dead people is something that she's going to start to grapple with and kind of come out
interesting.
through it. Yeah.
Yeah, why am I only good around dead people? I guess that's a
Yeah.
question neither you nor I would ever have to think about, is it? But
Yeah. I
but
think about it insofar as I write Dahlia, and that is,
sure,
yeah,
sure, sure.
yeah.
So that's actually it brings up an interesting topic as well. The fact that you have chosen to have her or to have us play while she is revisiting somewhere that she grew up with all these people she hasn't seen in forever. You could have very well just made her at some random colony that she doesn't know anybody and she has no attachment to.
Yeah.
Was that attachment? When did the idea of making sure there was attachment there hit in your narrative process, and how important was that to the overall
Yeah,
message?
this was one of those other things that too just was like almost there from the get-go.
Hmm.
It's kind of one of those like chicken and egg things where I can't quite remember exactly what happened first.
Sure.
But in those first couple of months of like ideation, like all of these pieces were surprisingly there in some form right off the bat, right? Like I did feel like it was a really interesting story to juxtapose the two, right? Of this world where you're learning about the people who have died and what they tried to do to help each other, how they feel about their own deaths, and then you juxtapose that against somebody else who is dealing with things like survivor's guilt and how do I forgive myself? How do I move on? A sense of closure, right? And like I feel like that sense of closure was really necessitated from having some kind of relationship to the people that she is saying goodbye to. I had this realization like a couple months ago that I think a lot of this was heavily informed by the pandemic
Yeah.
and going through a global pandemic and like how do we all kind of relate to that situation. So I think the homecoming angle and the personal angle is super important in order to be able to really dive into all the different facets around how we grieve and how we think about death and like how we kind of respond to these situations.
Sure, sure, sure. So the name Dahlia, one of the names most associated with death as a concept that isn't Kubler or Ross, and we'll get to that. But I'm curious now, Black Dahlia, you think of like the murders, obviously, but also maybe a little bit of a Black Widow sort of thing, right? But Dahlia here seems more of like just referential. There's none of that negative connotation. What went into the making sure that her name, or what went into the choice of the name Dahlia, and when did you land on that?
Yeah, again, Dahlia has always been Dahlia.
Man,
I know there's just certain things with this game that like once we had it, and like obviously like we fine tuned and we questioned and we
sure.
analyzed and then we made sure that like the decisions were still the right decisions. And I think part of that was because this game, like Ambrosia Sky, is set in like an agricultural colony and
Hmm.
food production is super important. And Dahlia as a name, like obviously like we're spelling it different from the flower, but dahlias are such beautiful flowers and they're such hardy flowers. And so I think like that kind of like organic nature of it just made it feel really sticky pretty early on. There's also just something really beautiful about like on like a sonic level, right? Like the name sounds really lovely to say. And it just
It
kind of
does.
like once you say it, it's just kind of like clicked right away. And then once we had the name and we're kind of looking at like agricultural like customs and traditions, we had this idea in world building that we haven't like it exists in the world building right now. That the idea of like when these people in the setting were training, learning how to grow crops, learning how to kind of tend to the fungal farms, that they would teach young students how to grow by using flowers. And so this idea that like flowers are this thing that you can use to teach people how to grow and how to take care of each other and how to provide food and like how to tend to community was really sticky. And that just kind of further reinforced having her name also
Okay.
be a flower name. So
Sure, sure.
yeah.
Um, Going back to what I referenced earlier, Kubler-Ross's five stages of dying or death or acceptance. It's a denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance, I believe, are the five. Um, was I'm curious if we would experience them in this game through Dahlia, because she seems like she is acceptance personified. She is the one completing the process, but then you have all of this rich narrative potential in the people that she's saving, and or not saving, the people that she's performing these rites on, and the audio logs that you hear of being the other four. Is that something that you're considering too? Am I hitting something here, or am I way off?
Dahlia is definitely not acceptance. I see why
Oh,
her role would
interesting.
make her acceptance.
Okay.
She is this really emotionally chaotic person, right? Like, she is not super stoic. And so coming home is definitely like all of these emotions inside of her are getting brought out to the 100th degree. And so we do
Interesting.
kind of see Dahlia moving through these emotions a little bit, not necessarily for one person per se, but kind of
Sure.
for everybody, for her home colony as well, and then also for herself and different things. So she's actually kind of moving through those stages as we kind of go through the game with her. Not in a perfect like one-to-one, like I didn't like write them out and map them out, but that's definitely a part of how I was envisioning her going through her feelings of survivor's guilt and trying to reconcile the fact that like she left, and because she left, she's alive.
Okay. Oh, okay. That's interesting too. I hadn't
Yeah.
that yeah, just clicked for me too. I know you said Survivor's Good a couple of times, but for some reason that time it hit.
Yeah.
There it is. So that's what sometimes that's what it takes. Not enough coffee today, I suppose. But I guess this has been great. I appreciate the conversation. Just one last question for you.
Yeah.
What are you hoping that your players learn about death from playing this game? You've taken this opportunity to write this story about death as a positive. Not your first rodeo, as we talked about, but
Yeah.
what for someone who's coming into this game with a fresh set of eyes, maybe hasn't played your games before,
Yeah.
what is the overall message you want them to take from Dahlia's journey, and how can they extrapolate that to the concept of the positivity of death as a whole?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things, right? Like I think any emotional response people have to this game will be rewarding and validating. I think for me it's also just like I hope it becomes a space where people can kind of sit with some of their emotions about their own mortality or their own things that they feel like they need to forgive themselves for, and kind of just like have a quiet place to kind of just sit and just
Mm-hmm.
witness, right? I think there's value into just like how we're witnessing some of the death rituals in the game, like just also witnessing your own emotions and kind of just having a space to not have to rationalize or anything like that. You can just kind of sit and feel. I think is good enough for me. Actually, not good enough. Like that's a huge outcome. So
Just sit around and feel. Put that on the back of the box.
honestly, feelings
There's
are
your pull quote.
yeah.
Book it. Sit around and feel. Kait Tremblay, narrative director of Software. Kait, I want to thank you so much for your time and your words here today. I'm very much looking forward to this game. It has again fascinated me since the moment I sat in that demo room at Summer Games Fest, and I am looking forward to sitting down and feeling. Thanks, Kait.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.
Hey, once again, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed my interview with Kait Tremblay. Check out Ambrosia Sky. I believe there's a demo out now on Steam, but if not, hopefully there will be soon. And look for it to launch fully later in the year. Thank you very much for watching. Again, if you enjoyed it, please let me know via comment. If you did not like it, let me know what you didn't like, and I can fix it for next time. But either way, I hope you have a great day, and thank you for watching.